In this video, we're going to be talking about using AI to create scientific visualizations. And you may have, a paper that you're working on or a publication, or you may just be trying to communicate some concepts to various people based on your research. And so I'm going to show you how to use AI to brainstorm your visualizations and then create them using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And then you'll be able to export it, the code, and use it however you'd like. You can either use that as a standalone supplement to a publication or put it on a web page that's dedicated to a publication. You may just have it be static and print it on, or put it actually on the publication itself. Lots of different ways you can use this, but to get the actual code or the visualization itself, we're going to use a couple different tactics here. So let's dive in. The first, start here is that you need to come up with some ideas. And you may have some concrete ideas on how you want to display the data in a publication, but you may not. You may want another set of eyes or another mind to kind of think about it and brainstorm possibilities. And AI is great at that. So in a previous video, we talked about LLMs are what people commonly think about as AI, but it's a large language model, ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, Google Gemini. There are a lot of different options you can use to be your co-intelligence here. So you'll want to choose your provider. In this case, I used Anthropic's Claude because they just released a new model and I wanted to try it out. And then you'll pick your model. So any of these providers of the LLMs, they're going to have a variety of different options for what you can use. And for the most part, we're probably not requiring super advanced models to achieve what we're trying to do here. But if you're able to, pick the most advanced option, especially if you have a paid account, you have access to models that are more advanced. And that might be important because if you're putting your entire publication into the chat interface, it's going to be able to parse that information and make more sense of it and come up with ideas that are maybe sharper than if you use the base model. So what I did was I went into Claude and I put this prompt here that you can see. So I said brainstorm visualizations, 10 possible visualizations that would help explain this publication. And for the publication itself, I just went to OpenAlex and looked for something on, renewable energy, because I think that might be, have options for visualizations that could be interesting. And so then you're going to, pick whatever one looks the most promising to you. You can obviously do as many as you'd like. In this case, before I show what I actually built, I do want to give you a little bit of a background. The library that we're going to use in this video is called D3. D3 is an open source visualization library that uses JavaScript. You don't necessarily need to know all the code and the ins and outs of JavaScript, but this is, it's pretty good. It's got a lot of different options. It's very powerful. It's interactive. There are other options out there that you can play with. And you can just specify that when you're generating your visualization. But in this case, we're using D3, and I told it to pick options that D3 would be able to generate. So once you decide on a visualization, then you're going to give it this prompt. And I guess I should make clear that what I did is in a past video, I actually used AI coding editor, Cursor, to generate the code. In this case, I didn't actually use Cursor. I just went straight into Claude's interface, just like ChatGPT, and just did it all through chat. And for simple kind of one-shot things like this, that can be a really great way to do it because you won't get lost in the details of the specific code that's getting generated. But in the prompt, I said, using d3.js, create a visualization for, and I put the one that I chose, in an artifact so that I can easily copy the source code. So an artifact is it is a separate display, different from the chat interface, and it will just put all the code in a nice clean box that you can grab easily. And it oftentimes has the ability to flip between the code actually running. So in the case with Claude, when I made this visualization, it showed me what it actually looked like when it was running, and then I could flip to the code, and then I could grab that code. And so if whatever you're using, if you're using Claude, you're going to get that option. I believe ChatGPT has that option as well. You can play around with the visualization, and you can make sure that it works how you're hoping. One important note, and it sounds a little silly, but make sure that the visualization is accurate. So if this is your publication, you're going to intimately know the data. Make sure that it's not making up stuff. It's not fudging details. It's not inserting, data that maybe doesn't accurately reflect your data, your publication. Because one downside of LLM technology is that it can hallucinate. And that's a term that describes how LLMs, they really want to please you. They really want to make you happy. And they will sometimes just make stuff up. It happens less frequently than it used to, but it can still happen. So you always want to check what it's making and make sure that it makes sense. So next step, I did want to tell you a little bit about D3. I showed you the screenshot earlier. It's short for data-driven documents, and it's just a JavaScript library that creates dynamic, interactive visualizations using web technologies. And one important piece is the license. So sometimes when you when you use things on the web, they're often going to have a license. So the person who made it is saying you can use it in these cases. And sometimes these libraries don't allow you to use their code in specific cases like commercial settings or, there's all sorts of different limits depending on the license. The license for D3 is an ISC license, which is very similar to an MIT license that is very permissive. So it lets you, use it in almost any way that you want, as long as, they're not providing a warranty in any way. So you may want to look at the license and just make sure. But for the most part, MIT and ISC license, there are other licenses that, most organizations are okay with, but you should be pretty good with D3. And then the next step is just iterate on it. So whatever it produces, you may not like exactly how it came out. You may want to ask for different colors or the formatting to work differently or the data to work differently. And I'll show you an example in the visualization that I made to start. It actually had a couple random options selected, and I wanted it to start with nothing by default so that I could add in the different values that were getting overlaid into the visualization. Another thing that you might want to keep in mind is that sometimes these code generators they'll have an error or they'll have a mistake and they won't realize it. So you won't see anything on the screen, but it will think that it works fine. So if you say, hey, I think there's an error, please regenerate it. It'll just regenerate it. So once you have the visualization that you're happy with, then you're going to need for it to be exported in a format that you can put on your website if that's where you want to put it. So in this case, I imagine somebody might have a page on their website where they're going to have a link to their publication, and then maybe they have a visualization or they have some in-depth explanation of the concepts in the publication, and they have a variety of visualizations that illustrate different concepts from within the publication. So this is the prompt that I used. I picked for the visualization that I did an interactive radar chart comparison, and that was actually what it suggested. So it said, hey, here are all the options. I think probably the best one to use is this interactive radar chart comparison. And so I'm telling it to make that one in a code artifact, which is that separate window. And I told it in the prompt, I'm pasting this text into the, how this is pronounced, WYSIWYG. So what you see is what you get editor. Those are just those rich text editors that you see on your, email editing or on websites or on documents where you can go select and format the text in a little, variety of options that you can adjust for bulleted text and bold it and change the font, etc. So I'm telling it that that's where I'm going to be putting it so that it knows, it just has the context of what it needs to generate. That might be important for it. And I say to adjust the styles to target only the visualization so that they don't affect other elements on the site. Also, make container classes and IDs unique so that they don't conflict. You may not follow this last bit, but I found that when I'm generating visualization code, what can happen is when you paste it into your field for the content, the formatting code might affect the rest of your website. So I'm just telling it here that I don't want it to be overly broad so that it doesn't affect the outside code, which can happen. And so with that, it's going to then generate some HTML. And this is how you're going to take that code and put it on your website. So first thing, you want to test it and just make sure it works on your computer. And the best way to do that is to go to a non-rich text editor. So rich text, it's sometimes when you're editing text, it's going to embed all sorts of formatting into that text. And when you save it, that special formatting is not going to be able to be read by the browser, or it's going to be read by the browser, but it's going to produce strange kind of side effects. So you want a text editor that is not going to save in rich text. It's just going to be a .txt with no rich text. If you Google that, you can check if the text editor you want to use is not a rich text editor. I think just like, Windows Notepad or text editor, I forget what the app is on Mac. Those just no nonsense text editors or a code editor will produce non-rich text code. So you want to open that up, paste your code into that text field, and then you're going to want to save the file on your desktop or wherever with a .html extension at the end of it. So you might pick a descriptive file name, in this case, interactive-radar-chart.html. You generally don't want to put spaces in the file name. Oftentimes it's not a big deal, but sometimes you can run into issues where the space causes problems. So best to either replace that with an underscore or a dash. And then wherever you save that file, you just double click on it and load it in Chrome or Firefox or Edge or whatever browser you're using. Because the file will have a .html extension, it should load it in your browser. One thing to be careful of is that sometimes the extension is not visible to you in your operating system. So you may have to figure out how to make that extension visible, because otherwise you're going to save it as interactive radar chart.html, but then secretly behind the scenes, it'll have a .txt extension that you can't see, and then it's going to open it up in a text editor. So if that happens, you're going to want to make sure that it is saving it as a .html file, and then load it in the browser and see how it works. I would load it in Chrome, I'd load it in Firefox, I'd load it in Edge, all the various browsers. Make sure that you don't see any issues in a particular browser. And once you confirm that it works, then we're going to want to do one more step here, just to be safe, is AI code that's generated, it may have security issues. It may have problems. And if you're not a software engineer, you may not recognize that if you put this up on your website, it might have an issue. Usually for visualizations that you're not saving any input from the user, it's not going to a database or anything like that, usually the risk is pretty low. But one way that you can address that is you can just open up a new window in your AI tool, so Claude or ChatGPT, and paste the code into that window. And then you can ask the AI to see if it has any potential security issues. So here's the prompt that I would use. It's very helpful with these LLM technologies to tell it the role that it is supposed to be assuming. So you say, you are a security researcher specializing in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript vulnerabilities. Please analyze this code and call out any potential vulnerabilities it may have. that will allow it to, in a separate window, go through and look at this code with a fine-tooth comb and try to call out any issues that it sees. Again, it may not be accurate, so you can't trust it entirely. But if it's something that you're just putting on your website, and again, there's no user input, they're just like maybe selecting, values that change the setting on the visualization, you may be okay with what it says. If you want extra peace of mind, always ask, a developer who, is familiar with security, whether there could be any issues, and just confirm that it's safe. Maybe your team at your organization has a security team that you can ask. So once you've satisfied that and you're comfortable with it, you don't want to take all the code that was generated, because it's going to have some elements that are probably already going to be visible or present on the code that you're going to paste this into on your website. So if you're using WordPress or some content management system, it's going to give you a text field usually where you can paste stuff. You do want to make sure that you can actually paste scripts and more advanced elements. Sometimes that stuff is locked down and you're actually not able to paste it. So you may have to find a different option if it doesn't allow you to save your code. But if it does, you're going to want to just copy everything, including the script tags, everything including the style tags, so everything in between these, including them, and then anything in between the body tags, but not including the body tags, because those are already going to be present on the page that you're pasting this into. So quick example here. So this is some HTML. We have an HTML opening tag. We have a head. You don't want to touch that. You want to grab the script, so the script tag here, and then the style. So you want to copy those. And then you want to copy everything in between the body here. And then that's what you'll put that into your web page, text field. It might be helpful to open up a new text document and then paste just that stuff in. So in the same order. So this stuff's going to be on top, and then this stuff, and then you copy that and paste it into your web page. But you definitely don't want to include this stuff up here. It might not, cause an issue even if you did, but it might be problematic. So best to avoid it. If you do paste it and you save it and you're not seeing anything, you might not be able to paste this on your web page. So you might have to make a standalone web page and host that somewhere else. So just keep that in mind. So this is a example visualization that I'm going to show you that I used Anthropic's Claude with their new model as of today. I think it was released yesterday at the time of recording here. And I wanted to just see what it could do. Obviously, this use case does not need the most advanced model, but I just went with it. And I asked it to review the publication that I found and come up with some ideas for visualizations, 10 different ideas. And the one that it suggested was an interactive radar chart comparison. So let's take a look at that visualization and see what it came up with. So here we have, it put all this stuff outside of it. So energy storage technologies comparison, interactive radar chart, and it says click the technology buttons below. There's probably a ADA color contrast issue here that we might want to address, but it's giving the user some instructions. And then we have different options here. And this is what I was saying when I first generated it. It had a couple random ones selected, but in this case, you see what it did here. It made a radar chart with the different attributes that it saw in the publication, and then it gave the options that were evaluated in that publication. I actually didn't go through the publication and compare to make sure all this stuff was accurate, but if it were my publication, I definitely want to make sure that all this stuff is actually accurate and the data that it's using is correct. So in this case, let's compare, lead acid batteries. I can see, they're really good at response time and they're fairly efficient, very scalable, very cost effective. And let's compare that against lithium ion. I see lithium ion is a lot more energy dense, little less efficient, same response time, similar lifetime, similar scalability, and the cost effectiveness is where there's a difference there. So, and then I could compare other options as well. So compare that to hydrogen. I can see that it's got similar energy density. So this is kind of neat. The user can go through, whoever's looking at your publication, and visualize these options. And you might have a part of your publication, some explanations here that talk about the different trade-offs and the different energy storage options. So I did, like I said, I had it start with nothing instead of randomly starting with stuff, because I think just seeing a big blob of colored, shapes here would be kind of weird for the user. I may find that, if nothing's selected, it's not clear to people that they've got to click on these things. So maybe there are ways that I could iterate with the AI to come up with a way to make that more, intuitive. So that's it, kind of in a nutshell. And let's look at this process. If we go look at the Claude conversation that I have, so I pasted the publication text in there. I said, brainstorm the potential visualizations. It came up with a bunch of different options here. And at the end, it made a recommendation. It may not always do that, but it did in this case. And so then I said, using D3JS, make the interactive radar chart comparison. So I told it which one I wanted it to make. And it made that, let's see here. So it made it did an explanation of everything. And then I told it to, start with no values by default. And then it made the update. So if we look at, this is that artifact. So over here, you can see that it has the code rendered, and then I can flip between the actual code itself. And I see that this is the 6th version. I can go back and look at previous versions. So this is kind of a neat interface here. And then it's telling me what it changed. And then I told it that I was pasting it into a WYSIWYG editor, and I wanted the styles to be unique, because the way that it did it by default, it would have affected the page that I wanted to put it on. It would have affected the external styles. And so then it went through and generated everything uniquely. And it's like, all right, we're done. So that was pretty successful. It worked, pretty closely to what I was thinking out of the box. Moving on, a couple tips that might be helpful for you as you're doing this on your own. There are pros and cons to referencing external sources. So in the HTML that it generated, it referenced the d3.js source code from an external source. So this is somewhere that is like a kind of an official version of D3.js. It was hosted in Cloudflare, which is a trusted source, and that's helpful because I don't have to go to my web administrator and ask them to put some JavaScript source code on the web server. I don't have to interact with anybody really. I just refer to that external source, and I can start making stuff with D3.js. So that's pretty helpful. And because it's being served from a really fast source, the time to load the page or load the JavaScript is going to be really fast. So that's a benefit as well. Oftentimes services like Cloudflare will actually serve it from a server that's closest to the user. So it's not like it's serving it from some place in Germany. If you're in San Francisco, it's probably going to serve from a server that's in San Francisco. So it's going to be much faster. There are some cons though. One issue is that you're dependent on some external site's availability. In the case of this code that was generated, it uses Cloudflare. Cloudflare, it's a big company. It's probably always going to be available. Maybe not as risky, but sometimes you'll see, JavaScript or CSS or source code that is hosted in some random place. And so if they take that down or they're having site issues, that could create, it could break your code. Everything could break and you might not even know it. So that is something you want to consider. Another potentially larger risk is that if you are referencing code that is on somebody else's web server, they could change that code and potentially inject different code onto your web page because you're now including it. So they could do stuff that might affect your users, and that could be a real security issue. The other issue is if the website removes that code, it'll just break. So that could be a problem as well. So you definitely want to know what you're getting into when you're referencing an external source. A couple other pro tips. In addition to testing on all browsers, so like Chrome and Edge and Firefox, you should test on mobile. And you can either actually, try to view it on a mobile device. You put this on a web page, it's much easier to test it on a mobile device. But if it's just on your computer, it can be challenging to test it on a mobile device. But if you load it in Chrome and then just make the browser very narrow so that it's similar to the width of a phone, then you're going to be able to see how that visualization is going to behave on a more narrow browser, which phones almost always are. You may find that narrower browser windows, not even just a phone, like if somebody just has a really, small Chrome window, like they made the window really narrow on their desktop, it could just completely break the visualization. So you might go back to your LLM and say, hey, can you make a mobile-friendly version of this code so that it doesn't break on mobile? Or and then go save it and see if it is okay on mobile. And if it's not, if you've tried to iterate on it and you just can't figure it out, there are a couple options you have. So you can just tell the AI to make your code so that it just shrinks the whole thing down proportionally. So it's always the width of the browser window. And that may be problematic if it makes everything super, super small and then you can't actually click on anything because you can't even read the text. But it might be better than having it be completely broken. And if all else fails, you can just tell the LLM to, if it detects a screen that is more narrow than a certain dimension, to just say you can only view this visualization on a desktop browser, or put some sort of a message or something. You can figure out how to handle that. So those are pretty much all the points. Feel free to post questions and comments in the video. We do read all the comments. Don't forget to, we do have office hours where you can come ask questions if you're trying to make your own visualizations. And I hope this was helpful for you.